All right, guys. B'Shem Hashem Na'aseh v'Natzliach. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. Whoops. Sorry. Thank you very much for joining me for the learning of Parashat Shavua B'Ezrat Hashem Yitbarach. Tonight we're going to be learning Parashat Vayera, and we would like to dedicate tonight's learning for the complete and speedy recovery of Kol Cholei Yisrael, especially all those that were wounded in the terror attacks. And we'd like to learn for the complete and speedy retrieval of all those that were taken captive. They should come home soon, B'Ezrat Hashem, to their families. And we're learning Le'ilu Nishmat, all those that were murdered by the terrorists, Yimach Shemam V'Zichram, and Hashem, Yinkom Damam, Hashem should avenge their blood, B'Ezrat Hashem. We should know only good news for all of Klal Yisrael. Okay, so we begin tonight, Parashat Vayera, and I'd like to focus on the beginning. Vayera alav Hashem be'elonei mamre v'hu yoshev petach ha'oel kechom hayom. So, as we know, over here, Rashi tells us Hashem appeared to Avraham, levaker et ha'chole. Hashem came to do the mitzvah of bikur cholim. One of the most interesting things that Hashem does all of the mitzvot that He tells us to do. It's very interesting that Hashem puts on tefillin, and Hashem does nichum avelim. He visits and consoles those who are mourning. So too, Hashem is mevaker cholim. Hashem visits the sick. And as you know, many times in the Torah it says that we have a mitzvah to cling to Hashem. Many such mitzvot where we have to go in the ways of Hashem. And the Gemara asks, how could you cling to Hashem? Hashem is esh ochlahu. Hashem is fire. You cannot cling to fire. And the answer is, the Gemara says that you cannot cling to him mamash, but at the same time you can mimic him. You can follow his ways. You could do things that give off the same type of thing that Hashem does. You can be like Hashem. And over here, this is one of those mitzvot where it says, Mahu rachum afata yerchum. If Hashem is merciful, you should be merciful. Right? Mahu mevaker cholim, just like He visits the sick, so too you should visit the sick. You should also visit the sick. So I would like to zone in on that for just a minute. I think it's important to know and to hear some of the Gemaras on this incredible mitzvah of Bikur Cholim. And it does say, right, that Hashem visits the sick, so too we have a mitzvah to visit the sick. So there are a couple of things that we need to know about this mitzvah. First of all, I'd like to share with you what the Gemara in Masechet Nedarim, Daf Mem Amud Aleph tells us. The Gemara tells us, just plain and simple, anybody that visits an ill person causes him to live. And if a person does not visit the sick, says the Gemara, he causes him to die. So says the Gemara, what do you mean? What exactly does that mean? Says the Gemara, it means right? So in other words, the idea is that part of the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, as a matter of fact, I would say the main part of Bikur Cholim is not only to visit the sick, but when you are there, to pray for the sick, to pray for that person to have a refuah shlema. That is the key to properly fulfilling the mitzvah of Bikur Cholim, that you offer a prayer to Hashem. Now, why is it so important to do that physically there? The answer is because when you do the mitzvah Bikur Cholim, you are actually having an encounter with the divine presence. It says that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, rests above the head of the sick person. Now it's brought down that a person should not sit above the ill. The reason is because since the divine presence is there, so for you to sit above him is almost to say like sitting above the head, sitting above the Shekhinah, which is inappropriate. It's not proper. You can stand because standing is a sign of respect for the Shekhinah, but to sit above the ill person is a problem. It used to be that they would lie him down on the ground. So if you're sitting on a chair, you're sitting on an elevated platform above the sick person, so then you are like sitting above the Shekhinah, and that's considered to be an inappropriate thing to do. For that reason, what they would do is they would actually sit on the floor so that they would be at ground level with the Shekhinah. That's the idea. But that's the idea. That's why the Gemara tells us always that a person should never pray in Aramaic. Some say that a person should never pray Stam in a different language at all. But the main point is that when you pray in Aramaic, you have a problem because the malachim, the angels, don't speak Aramaic. And there's usually an angel that is in charge of taking your tefillah up to Shamayim. And being that they don't understand what you're saying, they cannot do it. So says the Gemara, that goes out the window when you are in the room with a sick person, because it says Hashem yis'adenu al eretz tevai. Hashem is aiding that sick person, and Hashem is present there in that room. The Shekhinah, divine presence, is there. So you do not need the intermediary called an angel. You don't need that method of transportation, because the Shekhinah is right there. So therefore, you could pray in any language that you want. By the way, in general, we avoid this problem by having a minyan. That's the power of minyan. Minyan alleviates this issue because when you have 10 men in the same room, so it says in the Tanya, there's such a tremendous amount of a concentration of Shekhinah in the room that it says even the Malach Gabriel gets scared from the incredible power of divine presence that's in the room. So therefore, again, you don't need the angels. Now, again, the usual explanation is that it's specifically about the language Aramaic. It is brought down in the Mishnah Masechet Sotah that you could pray in any language that you want. So therefore, you don't usually have this problem. But when it comes to Aramaic, that problem does exist. That's the reason why when it comes to Slichot, Chacham Vadia writes that if you don't have a minyan, don't say the prayers that are in Aramaic. Okay, good. But that's the first thing that I wanted to point out, that the main part of bringing Bikur Cholim, what the Gemara tells us is that a person has to be Mevakesh Alav Rachamim Sheichye. You have to pray for this fellow that he should become better. The Gemara tells us that there was that it's a little bit more than that as well. The Gemara says that there was a student of Rabbi Akiva, and this student of Rabbi Akiva became sick, and it says that that people didn't come to visit him. None of the Chachamim went to visit him, and then Rabbi Akiva went to visit him. And ubishvil shekibdu veribtzu lefanav, because they swept the floor and they settled the dust on the ground before him, so that student became better. So Chaya, he became better. Amar lo Rebbe, he said to him, Rebbe, hechiyitani, you have brought me back to life. So says the Gemara, Yatzar Rabbi Akiva v'darash, Rabbi Akiva got out and explained, Kol mi she'en mevaker cholim, if you don't visit the sick, ki'ilu shofech damim, it's as if you killed him. You see, it's a very basic practical lesson. People need advocates when they're ill. They need somebody to fend for them. They need somebody to make sure their needs are addressed and taken care of. And the big problem is that sometimes if there's nobody there to address your need, so then their need goes unaddressed, plain and simple as that. And the person cannot ignore it. It needs to be addressed. So Rabbi Akiva showed up, and then they finally took care of his place. They cleaned the floor, they settled the dust. You know, this is still a functioning, living human being. He needs it to be a proper environment. He needs to get better. And then they took care of his whole area, and he said to him, Rabbi Akiva, you brought me back to life. Now, it's not just the fact that they cleaned up, but it's also the fact that it was somebody that came to show that he cared about Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara tells us that it takes away 1/60th of the person's illness at the very least. And therefore, Abutai, Rabbi Akiva brought him back to life. And he said, Rabbi Akiva left and he said, if you don't go to visit the sick person, it's ki'ilu shofech tamim. It's as if he spills blood. And then the Gemara takes it to the next level. This is something that we should all know, because we could all use this. Amar Rav. Rav said, the famous Rav, student of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Listen to the following words. Kol hamevaker et hacholeh, anybody who visits a sick person, nitzol midina shel gehinam. That person is spared from the judgment of Gehinam. Rabotai, I can't stress enough how important that is. You know, there are certain things that it's brought down, they save a person from Gehinam. I'll give you an example. It says, there's a midrash that says that if a person learns Mishnayot, he's saved from Gehinam, Mishnah. Because it says about Mishnah, that it says, Ule'asher shmeina lachmo. Asher was blessed with a land that had a lot of wonderful fats, and his bread would be nice and beautiful. So it says that Shmeina is the same letters as Mishnah, which is also the same letters as Neshama, and which means that when a person passes away, the Midrash tells us, Asher, the son of Yaakov, his Neshama goes down to the entrance of Gehinam, and he asks every person that was supposed to go into Gehinam, do you learn Mishnayot? Do you have a consistent study of Mishnayot? And if the fellow answers, yes, I do, then Asher ben Yaakov does not let him in. So Asher ben Yaakov actually stands at the gates of Gehinam and does not let the person go into Gehinam. I mean, if that's not the best sales pitch for learning Mishnayot, I don't know what is. That is amazing. So over here, we have another one like that. And that is somebody who visits the sick. Person who saves the sick is saved from Gehinam. Rabotai, I can't think of something that we could look for more than that. That's something that we need. So over here says the Gemara, well, what's the proof for that? So the Gemara tells us, it says in the pasuk, Ashrei maskil el dal beyom ra'a yemaletehu Hashem. So praiseworthy is the one who thinks about the needs of the needy. Beyom ra'a, on the bad day, yemaletehu Hashem, Hashem will save him. Who is this dal? Dal means an impoverished person. Over here says the Gemara, it doesn't mean impoverished, but rather it means a sick person. Why? Shenemar midala yevatzeeni, which means he will end my life with sickness. Midala. So says the Gemara, we see the word dal means sick. So what's the next pasuk that comes afterwards? Again, let's read the two psukim. They both come from Tehillim. It says, Ashrei maskil el dal, fortunate is the one who thinks about the needs of the sick. Beyom ra'a yemalteu Hashem, on the bad day, Hashem will save him. So says the Gemara, very good, but what's the reward for that? So what do you mean, what's the reward for that? You don't go to Gehinam. What more could you ask for? Beyom ra'a, on the bad day, yemalteu Hashem, Hashem will save him. Says the Gemara, no, we're asking a different question. What's his reward in this world? What's his reward? Says the Gemara, easy. Look at the next pasuk in Tehillim. It says over there, Hashem yishmerehu v'yichayehu v'ushar ba'aretz ve'al titeneu benefesh oivav. So Hashem, you will guard him, you will give him life, and he'll be fortunate, and you will not give him over to his enemies. So look at this, a person that does Bikur Cholim, not only does he get saved from Gehinam, but he also has a life where Hashem protects him, saves him, does not let him fall in the hands of his enemy. That's a huge, huge bracha. And not only that, it says, "V'ushar ba'aretz shiyu hakol mitkabdim bo." Everybody will take pride in him. Ve'al titneu benefesh oivav sheyizdamnu lo re'im. That he will always have good friends that will come to help him. It says that Naaman was a general of a different army, the Aramean army, Naaman Arami, and he was sick with tzara'at, and he went to Elisha to figure out what to do. And he figured Elisha will come and will bless him and will go over to his body and touch his body and help him. Elisha was the student of Eliyahu Navi, and Elisha was in the middle of bathing in the Jordan River, and he sends his attendant to tell Naaman to go and dip in the Jordan River 7 times. So he says, Naaman was very upset. He said, I don't understand. I thought doesn't he know I'm a general of an army? I thought he would come out to greet me. I thought he'd come out to help me. I thought he would do good for me, etc., etc. And this is what he does. He was very mad. So Naaman had certain advisors that were there. And the advisors said to him, I don't understand. If Eliyahu Navi, or if Elisha Navi would have told you to do all kinds of very hard, difficult things, would you not have listened? Of course you would. You want to get rid of your situation, right? All he asked you to do is dip in the river a few times. What's the big deal? Go do it. Maybe you'll get better. So he had good friends. He had good friends that gave him good advice, and that's indeed what he did, and he got better. So the pasuk is telling us somebody that does bikur cholim, not only does he get saved from Gehinam, not only does he have a good life in this world, Hashem protects him and saves him from his enemies, but Hashem also gives him friends that will give him good advice. Look at the incredible bracha that a person gets for bikur cholim, for visiting the sick. Quite amazing. I just want to mention that sometimes people also have to be careful when they do bikur cholim, not to be overbearing. Sometimes a person that does bikur cholim, he might be hanging around, the people might need some privacy, they might not want visitors that long. But it's important to be aware that if you do it right, it really is a tremendous, tremendous mitzvah. So I wanted to start off with that. I thought it was very important for us to know about it. Now we continue in the next segment of the parasha. So Avraham sees that there are these 3 people that are standing over there. They're outside, and he wants to bring them into his home. Okay. So famously, this is a really difficult thing for Avraham to do. As Rashi tells us, he's on the 3rd day after his Brit Milah, 99 years old. And it's really a challenge. It's very hard for him. But he does whatever he has to do in order to make sure that he's able to do the mitzvah of achnasat orchim, which is another incredible mitzvah that we can go on and on forever about. I'll just mention one thing. Says the Gemara Masechet Shabbat, I believe it's Kuf Chaf Zayin, Gadol achnasat orchim yoter me'akbalat pnei hashchina. Says that you see over here from Avraham Avinu, that Avraham Avinu told Hashem who came to visit him. Hashem is doing the bikur cholim, visiting the sick, and Avraham says, Hashem, please, al nat ta'avor me'al avdecha, please don't leave me. Right? I'm gonna go deal with these guests right now. Then I'm gonna come back. So now Avraham is running to the guests. Vayarotz likratam. He runs towards them, and you can imagine how painful that must be if you're on day 3 after the Brit Milah. Not easy at all. He's running, and he greets them, and he brings them into his home. There's so much to learn from the exchange. I'll just point out briefly. He runs inside, and he tells Sarah to prepare cakes, and it says Vela Bakar Ratz Avraham. Avraham ran to the bakar, to the cattle. Now, Vayikach ben Bakar Achvatov, right? He takes the Ben Bakar and he gives it to his, Ben Bakar is the cattle, and he gives it to his lad, which Chazal say is Ishmael. Vayamaher la'asot oto. He prepares it. Vayikach chema v'chalav ben Bakar asher asa. He takes butter and he takes milk. Ben Bakar and the cattle that he just did. Asher asa. Notice that word, asher asa. Literally means that he made, right? Vayiten lifnehem, and he gave it before them, etc. Chazal says something very interesting. There's a lot of interesting things to talk about over here. The first thing that I saw, big chidush, this week, is a midrash. It says, Ve'ela bakaratz Avram. Avram ran to the cattle. Literally, again, it means that Avram is running. Now, notice the running. Again, he's on day 3 after his Brit Milah. But the Midrash says something very interesting. It says, we know that it's brought down that he slaughtered 3 cows, in order to give each one of them tongue with mustard, which is a delicacy till this day. Tongue is considered to be a very great piece of meat. But it's brought down that he gave 2 of the cattle to Ishmael to deal with, and all of a sudden he notices the third cow is running away. Now, there's a midrash that says the following. The midrash tells us that the cow that ran away was none other than the Malach Raphael himself, that took the shape of a cow and then ran away. Now, where did the cow go to? So the cow went all the way till Me'arat HaMachpelah. So Avram is in Elonei Mamre, the plains of Mamre, and he's a few miles away from Me'arat HaMachpelah. And the cow ran all the way there, and says the Midrash, that is the moment that Avraham discovered Me'arat HaMachpelah. According to this Midrash, that was the time where he discovered the cave. It says that he reaches that Me'ara, and he sees 2 beds, and he sees the candles are lit, and he smells the smell of Gan Eden, and at that point he realizes that this is where he wants to be buried, he and Sarah Imenu. So this is a very interesting Midrash. Now the big question here is the following. Very interesting question. There are 2, I think, very big questions over here. Well, before we even get there, so what ended up happening? So he ends up still looking for this cow, right? He doesn't find the cow. Remember, the Malach Raphael was actually there, dressed as one of the Arabs, because he was there to heal Avraham and to save Lot from Sodom. So the Malach Raphael had a big job of saving to do. Meanwhile, this Midrash is telling us that he also decided to show him where Me'arat HaMachpelah is going to be. That's a very interesting thing to think about. So at any rate, what happens is he comes back and he needs this cow. So he figured, the Midrash continues, that he doesn't have time to find it at this point. So he simply made one. He simply made one by use of what we call Sefer Yetzirah, which is the book of creation, which is the book that we actually have till this day in print, about how to create things like HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, which is quite amazing to figure out. Some people know how to use it, but at any rate, the idea is Avraham made another cow from Sefer Yetzirah. Now, the big question is so the question is, why did he do that? Normally, you're not supposed to use what's called practical Kabbalah, like the Mishnah and Masechet Avot tells us, the Ishtamesh Betaga Chalaf, whoever decides to use the crown of Torah, meaning the secrets of Torah, Kabbalistic secrets, for benefit on this world, Chalaf, he doesn't have a good ending. It's not good for him. So why would Avraham do that? So the answer that's given in this Midrash is because Avraham felt that it was inappropriate to delay the guests. The guests are waiting for his meal, and it's not fair to them that they should be sitting and waiting for him. So he simply made it. And that is the reason that the Pasuk says he took the Ben Abakar Asher Asa. Now we explained it that it means Asher Asa, that what he prepared. But over here, based on this new Midrash that we're learning, Ben Abakar Asher Asa literally means what he made, what he created based on Sefer Yetzirah. The Malbim uses this to answer the famous question: how could Avraham feed dairy and meat to the Malachim? He took dairy, and he took, meaning the butter and the milk and the meat, and he places it in front of them. So everyone usually answers, well, it must be that they had the dairy first, and then they had the meat, right? Which is technically halachically acceptable. The problem with that is that it's brought down that when Moshe Rabbeinu went to get the Torah at Har Sinai, so it says that there's a chapter in Tehillim that says, Hashem Adonenu, right? Ma enosh ki tizkerenu ben adam ki tifkedenu, right? Asher tena hodecha al hashamayim. Hashem, why are you giving the Jewish people the Torah, right? Leave the Torah with us, with Hashem. Tena hodecha al hashamayim. Leave the Torah with the malachim. Why are you giving the Torah to the people? They don't deserve it. They're low. They're mundane. They're not holy. So to that, Hashem responded, "Excuse me, but I noticed that you happen to have had a meal with Avraham Avinu, and at that meal you ate dairy. You had milk. You had butter, and you also had meat. You had a beautiful piece of meat at that meal. What was that about? You expect me to leave the Torah with you when that's what you do? Even a little kid of the Jewish people knows that you're not supposed to do that." So that was Hashem's response to the Malachim. It seems to be that Hashem was telling them, look, you guys messed up. Or that's what it seems like it's saying. So therefore, there's a big question. So how could Avram do that for them? So the Malbim suggests, could be that the Ben HaBakar that he took was actually the one Ben HaBakar, the one cow, I guess out of the three, this was the only one that was served, that was made through Sefer Yetzirah. And it wasn't a real cow. And being that it wasn't a real cow, it wasn't considered to be eating meat and milk. That's the way the Malbim resolves this famous conundrum over here. I mean, you have to kind of force that answer, because if there were actually three cows and only one of them was made with Sefer Yetzirah, then you wouldn't really have a good answer. However, be it as it may, the issue over here is the following. Avraham Avinu is concerned with delaying the guests. He doesn't have the desire to keep running after another cow, because he does not want to delay the guests. Okay, fair enough. Question. It's quite some distance from Elonei Mamre all the way till Me'arat HaMachpelah. So there's a very basic problem over here. Avraham, you are not willing to delay the guests, but at the very same time, you're running literally miles to get this cow. Avraham, isn't that a delay? Right? Isn't that called delaying the guests? Now I want to just focus on this for a minute, because you should know that there are many halachic ramifications about this. It's brought down that the Chafetz Chaim, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, was very careful about this halacha. It's brought down in Shulchan Aruch that if you ever make a pledge to some kind of charity, so it's not considered to be a violation of lo te'acher leshalmo, which means do not delay in paying your pledge unless 3 festivals have gone by. So in other words, if let's say it's December 5th, you make a pledge. So there are 2 things that you need to do. Ideally, by the first festival that comes, which would be Pesach in this case, you should go ahead and pay your pledge. That would be the best. But you're not considered in violation of a negative transgression unless 3 festivals go by. Okay? Lo te'acher leshalmo applies only after 3 festivals. Fine. Again, ideally there's a mitzvah for you to get it done by the first festival. And that should be done. That's the right thing to do. But the violation does not take place until 3 festivals have gone by. Says the Shulchan Aruch, that is not so when it comes to poor people. If you pledge to aniyim, poor people that really need it right away, so then automatically when you say that you're supposed to give it, you should give it. You should not delay even slightly. That's a halacha. It's brought down in Yoreh De'ah, Siman Reish Nun Zayin, Seif Gimel, that right away, the minute that you said that you're going to do it, you have to take care of it right away. Forget about three festivals. It has to happen right away. And there's a very important reason for that. If you remember the story with Nachum Ish Gamzu was the fellow, he was the Rebbe of Rabbi Akiva, and he was once riding on his carriage, and he had lots of different things that he had with him that were different types of food and drinks, etc. And he was traveling, and there was a poor man that saw him traveling by, and he said, Rebbe Parneseni, he said to him, my master, please give me something. Obviously, he was very hungry. So Nachum Ish Gamzu said, no problem, just let me unload the donkey first. And by the time he got finished unloading, the guy had dropped dead. And that's when Nachum Ish Gamzu cursed himself, and he said, the eyes that saw you should go blind, the legs that didn't run to you should be chopped off. And he cursed himself a very bitter, heavy curse until he really became handicapped from his own curse. So the reason that this is the rule for poor people is because if they need it, they need it now. They need the help 5 minutes ago, not now, right? So therefore, the halakha says you have to give it to them now. So the Chafetz Chaim was extremely careful about this. And there was once a big tzaddik. He was the Av Bet Din of Stichin. His name was Leib Chasman, Zecher Tzedek Bracha. And he was a guest in the house of the Chafetz Chaim. He sees the Chafetz Chaim comes home with guests, and seemingly they were poor people. And the Chafetz Chaim skips Shalom Aleichem, skips everything, goes straight to Kiddush, straight to Hamotzi, and wants them all to eat. And he asked him afterwards, he says, Rabbeinu, what's the reason that you skip all these things? I mean, you're known. We don't skip minhagim. We don't skip things that are very important to us. Why did the rabbi skip Shalom Aleichem? And the rabbi answered him. He says, no problem. He says, the answer is very simple. The malachim, he says, the angels could wait a few minutes after these poor people eat something. So after they ate a little bit, then the Chafetz Chaim sang Shalom Aleichem during the meal. It's already in the middle of the meal. He started singing Shalom Aleichem to the malachim. But the point was that he felt that they really were so hungry that they needed to eat right away, and he did not want to delay them. And he writes this in the Mishnah Berurah as well, in Siman Taf Reish Lametet, in the Shara Tziyun, Siv Katan Samech Zayin. He writes that there's a chashash of Bal Te'acher. A person may be in violation of Bal Te'acher if he holds the aniyim back from eating. By the way, you should know it's a tremendous Kabbalistic ma'ala, a great ma'ala, to have aniyim at a person's home, particularly on the holidays. Besides for the fact that you're helping them to have simcha, but Kabbalistically you're doing and you're accomplishing tremendous things, especially on Rosh Hashanah, especially on the Yamim HaNoraim. It's a big mitzvah. But the point is that he was unwilling to let them wait. He said the malachim could wait a little bit until these people eat a little bit, and then we'll sing for them. No problem. But he wasn't willing to let them delay. So the big question is, how could Avraham Avinu decide to run after this cow while letting his guests sit there and wait, twiddling their thumbs, right? That's the big question. So I saw a pshat in the Otzar Plaot Torah, and he suggests an interesting idea. He says it's brought down that Avraham Avinu, the Yalkut Shimoni, brings down, there is a pasuk that says Ha'adam Gadol Ba'anakim, and it refers to Avraham Avinu, that the man who was a giant amongst the giants was Avraham Avinu, and it says Pesiotav Shel Avraham Avinu Ayu Gimel Milim. Avraham Avinu's steps alone were 3 mil, which is like, if 1 mil is 0.6 of a mile, you're looking at 1.8 miles. I mean, just his steps alone. So apparently, Avraham Avinu was a tremendously large individual that took huge steps and was doing so even in the sense of running. So therefore, it means that he got there rather quickly. I could offer a suggestion. Maybe all that means is that Hashem constantly did for Avraham kfitzat haderech. As you know, we're going to learn B'ezras Hashem by next week's parasha when Avraham has to find a zivug for Yitzchak, his son, Eliezer has a kfitzat haderech, a journey that was supposed to take a very long time. He got there by sunset, right? And everyone saw that the document that Avraham Avinu had signed was signed that morning, dated that morning, bequeathing everything to his son Yitzchak. So what you see is that Avraham Avinu was somebody that had kfitzot haderech. If his slave who represents him was given power of attorney, that means that shlucho shel adam kmoto, that he represents Avraham Avinu, or perhaps he represents Yitzchak, but it's the same family. He has kfitzot haderech, which means that Hashem helps him to get places very quickly. I can imagine that that's what it means over here as well. So, being that we know Avraham was the master of Chesed, it must be that he was able to reach Me'at HaMachpelah very quickly and get back very quickly as well. And that at some point he had to make the cow of Sefer Yetzirah with Sefer Yetzirah. Now the question that we have to address now is, of all times to show Avraham Avinu the Me'at HaMachpelah, of all times to introduce Avraham Avinu to the cave where Adam and Chava were buried, why now? Why at this point when Avraham has guests and he's supposed to hear the good news that his wife Sarah is finally going to become pregnant at the age of 90? Why at this point is there this pause? He has to run after a cow and find Me'at HaMachpelah that way. Why? What's the reason for that? So I think I heard this pshat from Rabbi Weiss, or Moshe Meir Weiss. He says the following idea. I think this was him. He says perhaps it's dafka now because, I don't know. I don't remember if this was him or not, but he says perhaps it was bedafka now because it's midah keneged midah, measure for measure. Meaning, right now Hashem has sent his angels to Avraham, and they needed a place. They needed a place to be. They needed a home for a certain time. And Avraham gave that to them. So measure for measure, Hashem shows Avraham, look, you gave my malachim a home. So in return, here is going to be your resting place. This is where you're going to have a home, so to say. This will belong to you. And it's not just a place, but it's a place that is like an entrance to Gan Eden. He smelled Gan Eden over there. So Hashem says, this is measure for measure. You gave my malachim a home, I'll give you a home as well, which is where your resting place will be for you and your wife. Another explanation could be that it's possible that until that point, Avraham, who did not yet know that his wife Sarah is going to have a child, was not at ease to know that he's leaving the world and Sarah Imenu does not have someone to perpetuate her name. That's something that was not sitting well with Avraham Avinu. And now he's about to finally be told that Sarah is going to be pregnant, and by this time next year, they will have a child. That's a boy that will perpetuate their name. Not just his name, but also Sarah's name. The boy will come from Sarah Imenu. That is the moment at which he's now going to feel that, okay, I left behind a child from me and my wife Sarah together, and now we can move on from this world. Now that I left behind somebody that's going to continue my legacy, now is the moment that I know that I can leave this world and I can start preparing for moving on to the next world. Because at that moment, that's exactly the moment that they were going to tell him about the fact that Sarah Imenu is going to become pregnant and going to give over, and going to have a child to give over, Baruch Hashem, everything that they believe to the next generation. Interesting to note the question of the Malachim to Avraham. Vayomeru elav, ayeh Sarah ishtech. They say to Avraham, where is Sarah, your wife? Vayomer hine ba'ohel. And he said, behold, she's in the tent. Now, this is a very interesting discussion because you have to ask yourself, why would they ask, where is Sarah, your wife? It's a funny question, especially back in the day when everything was so proper. If somebody were to simply inquire about somebody's wife, and say, hey, where is she? Like, we don't see her, as if to say, we want to see her. Well, why do you want to see my wife? Why are you asking about my wife? You're a random stranger. You're a random person. Why do you need to see my wife? Right? It's a funny question. So the question is, why indeed did they ask like that? So Rashi tells us that the whole point was to try and do what's called, to try and increase Shlom Bayit. Says Rashi, Leodia shetznuah haita. They were trying to show Avraham, look, your wife is not here. We know where she is. She's in the tent because she's very modest. And the key words are Kedei lechabeva al ba'ala. They wanted to make her beloved to her husband. They were trying to increase Shlom Bayit, which is a very big, very important mitzvah, to always try and make sure that there's Shlom Bayit. So that's one explanation. I heard another very interesting explanation actually from Rabbi Lasri. He says the following very interesting explanation. He says, Avraham Avinu also knew that Sarah, his wife, was in the tent behind. And he also knew that she was listening to the interactions between himself and the guests that just came to the house. So Avraham himself was a master of Shlom Bayit. And what he decided to do was, whenever he would serve them something, he gives them a little bit of this salad. He would say, this is the salad that my wife Sarah made. And then he would go on and give them another piece of meat and say, this is the meat that my lovely wife Sarah made. She's got the best spices. She's an amazing cook. And he was praising his wife Sarah again and again. This is what Sarah made over here. Sarah made this, Sarah made that, etc. And the beauty behind that was that he mentioned her so much, and he mentioned her name so much, that they just, as a matter of being stunned by the amount of times that he spoke about his wife Sarah, they had no other choice but to say, Aye Sarah ishtecha. Where is Sarah, your wife? Where is she? All day long you're talking about her. Sarah made this and Sarah made that. And Avraham Avinu knew that by him praising his wife, that she got a lot of nachat from that. She got a lot of pleasure by the fact that he was complimenting her so much. And they had no choice but to say, well, then where is she? We got to give our thanks to the chef. Rabotai, that's also an incredible lesson from Avraham Avinu. The chesed that he did, not only with his guests, but how he found an opportunity to do chesed even with his own wife, by complimenting her, by praising her, by singing about her wonderful qualities, which, by the way, she really did have. She really did all of a sudden, at the drop of a hat, start preparing for 3 random people. Can you imagine walking into your home today and you say to your wife, I have 3 random guests right now, drop everything you're doing, go prepare, go get the fine flour, go get this, go get that, and start making cakes. And she look at you like, are you out of your mind? Right? That's Sarah Imenu. Sarah Imenu, she understood that hachnasat orchim and bringing people closer to the Shekhinah is what life is all about. So yes, she dropped whatever she was doing and she went ahead and followed Avraham. So Avraham understood that. So he made a real effort to praise her. And that was something that was a very important thing that he did, because that was so important for us as Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim, that what our forefathers do is a siman for all of us. And we also have to find the time and make the effort to praise our spouse, to make our spouse feel good, make them feel like they're successful, make them feel like they are appreciated, right? And not just complain and bicker and say, well, you should have done a little bit more of this, you should have done a little bit more of that, and just, at each other, but rather to praise and to shower with praise. I thought that was a beautiful shot from Harav Lasri, Baruch Hashem, in the laws of Shlom Bayit, Baruch Hashem. Okay, everybody. So I think we can call it a night for tonight. Be'ezrat Hashem, we continue next week. Thanks for joining me, and wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much.